The first sound wasn't the boy's cry, it was the crack of his ribs against the mahogany table. And for one frozen heartbeat, no one in that echoing chamber dared to breathe. People like to believe City Hall is a place of order, of law, of justice. But when you've lived long enough in this city, you know the truth. Power has a way of turning the marble floor red, and it doesn't care whose blood it spills. 16-year-old Malik Carter had never been inside City Hall before today. He'd seen it from the outside, that grand, pompous building with its stone lions and bronze doors, the place where his mother said grown folks play dress up with other people's lives. He hadn't planned on stepping inside it until his civics class trip next month. But fate, or maybe injustice dressed in a uniform, had other plans. It began in the hallway, near the clerk's office. The officer's hand had clamped on Malik's shoulder before the boy could even ask why. The man was built like he'd been carved out of concrete, his jaw a block of pale stone, his eyes like wet steel. Malik didn't know his name yet, but he would never forget the way those fingers dug into him, dragging him toward the main chamber as though the building itself had swallowed him. "You think you can talk back to me, boy?" the officer growled, loud enough for the dozen people in the hallway to hear. "I didn't," Malik began, but the sentence ended with the air punched out of him. Inside the chamber, the sound of shuffling papers and low murmurs died instantly. Court clerks, city council members, a few journalists, they all turned as Malik was shoved forward. The officer slammed him against the nearest table, his badge catching the light. Malik's backpack slid off his shoulder, spilling open. A math notebook, a cracked phone, a pack of colored pencils, they scattered across the floor like debris after an explosion. "Sir, please," one clerk started, her voice trembling. "Stay out of this," the officer barked. His hand was on Malik's neck now, pressing him down. The boy's fingers splayed against the polished wood, knuckles white. The silence was alive. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that makes your pulse crawl, the kind that means everyone is watching but no one dares to intervene. Malik could hear his own heartbeat, loud and erratic, a war drum in his chest. He thought of his mother, of the way she always told him to keep his head down, to avoid trouble, to come home safe. He'd done everything right today. He'd left school on time, taken the usual bus, stopped at the corner store to buy a soda. He didn't know how it had gone from that to this, to his cheek pressed against the table while strangers stared. And then the chamber doors swung open. She walked in like a blade cutting through smoke. Tall, dark-skinned, hair pulled into a sleek bun that did nothing to soften the steel in her eyes. Her navy suit was flawless, her heels sharp against the marble. Attorney General Valerie Ames. Malik had seen her face on television at rallies, in debates, in interviews where she spoke about reforming the justice system. But seeing her here, in this room thick with the smell of sweat and fear, was like watching a storm roll in over a parched field. Her gaze took in the scene in one glance. The boy pinned, the officer's grip, the stunned faces. "Let him go," she said, her voice low but carrying. The officer didn't move. "Ma'am, this is police business." Her palm slammed against the judge's bench, the sound ricocheting off the chamber walls like a gunshot. "This is my business," she said. And the air shifted. For the first time since he'd been dragged inside, Malik felt the weight on his neck ease, not because the officer let go willingly, but because something in the room had shifted. Power had moved. The officer straightened but didn't step back. He was resisting what? Valerie's voice was ice. Walking down a public hallway while black. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Malik's chest ached as he drew in a deep breath, his knees trembling. He looked up at her, not sure whether to feel relief or fear. Valerie stepped closer, her heels clicking. "Name," she demanded. The officer hesitated. "Sergeant Blake." "Sergeant Blake," she said, tasting the syllables like they were something bitter. "You're about 10 seconds from a civil rights lawsuit that will make national headlines. Let him go. Now." The room was holding its breath again. Malik's neck was released. He straightened slowly, rubbing the spot where the officer's hand had been. His backpack still lay on the floor, his pencils scattered like fallen soldiers. Valerie's eyes softened when she looked at him. "You okay?" He nodded, though the truth was more complicated. His ribs hurt, his pride was bruised, and something deep inside him, something that used to believe in fairness, had cracked. She turned to the onlookers. "Everyone in this room just became a witness. You saw what happened, and you will speak the truth." A murmur ran through the crowd. The journalists, suddenly alert, scribbled furiously. The clerks glanced at one another. Sergeant Blake's jaw tightened. He matched the description of what? Valerie's words cut him off. A threat? A criminal? Or just a black child trying to exist? No one answered. Malik stooped to gather his things. His hands shook as he picked up the colored pencils. They didn't feel like they belonged to him anymore, like even these small pieces of his life had been tainted by what had just happened. Valerie's voice was steady, but Malik could hear the heat beneath it. Sergeant Blake, you will file a report. You will detail exactly what happened here, word for word, because I will be reading it personally. And you will pray that every syllable matches the testimony of these witnesses. The sergeant's mouth opened, then closed. Valerie looked at Malik again. Come with me. The chamber doors opened once more, and for the first time since this began, Malik saw a way out. They walked down the hallway together, past the same onlookers who had watched him be dragged in. Malik kept his eyes forward, but he could feel their stares, a mix of shame, curiosity, and something he couldn't name. Valerie didn't speak until they were outside, the cold air hitting them like a slap. You live nearby? Yes, ma'am, he said quietly. Good. You're not walking home alone. He glanced at her, unsure if she meant protection or surveillance. She stopped, crouched slightly so her eyes met his. What happened in there was not your fault. Do you understand me? He nodded again, but the words didn't settle in. Somewhere behind them, the heavy bronze doors of City Hall closed with a deep, final sound. Malik didn't expect the street outside City Hall to feel so loud. Car horns, footsteps, the distant wail of a siren, every sound seemed sharper, like the world was mocking the quiet terror that had just suffocated him inside. Valerie walked beside him with a stride that made people part instinctively. The two plainclothes agents who had been waiting near the steps fell in behind them without a word, their eyes scanning the street. Malik guessed they were hers. The attorney general didn't walk anywhere without shadows. Do you have family we can call? She asked. My mom's at work. She cleans offices downtown. Valerie's jaw flexed. She's going to want to hear from you before she sees this on the news. Malik's stomach dropped. News? Valerie gave him a look like he'd just asked if the sky was blue. Every reporter in that room had a camera phone. It's already out there. She was right. Less than a block away, Malik caught sight of a man in a hoodie scrolling on his phone. The video was already playing him bent over that table, the officer's hand on his neck. Even from across the sidewalk, Malik could hear the grainy audio, walking down a public hallway while black. He looked away, heat creeping up his neck. They stopped at a black SUV. One of the agents opened the back door for Malik. He hesitated. Am I in trouble? Valerie's voice softened just slightly. You were assaulted, Malik. You're not the one who should be worried right now. The ride was quiet. Outside the tinted windows, the city blurred by gray buildings, graffiti-tagged walls, kids with backpacks crossing streets. Malik kept thinking about his colored pencils, still sitting at the bottom of his bag like nothing had happened, as if they didn't just witness everything. Finally, Valerie spoke. You're going to hear a lot of people tell you that what happened was a misunderstanding, that it was about procedure or protocol. They'll want you to doubt what you felt in that moment. Malik stared at the floor mat. I know what I felt. Her eyes met his in the rearview mirror. Good. Don't let them take that from you. By the time they reached his neighborhood, the sun was low, casting long shadows between the narrow row houses. It wasn't the kind of place politicians usually visited unless there was a photo op involved. But Valerie didn't seem to be here for that. She walked him to his front door. The smell of fried onions and garlic drifted from a neighbor's kitchen. Somewhere down the block, a baby was crying. Malik unlocked the door. Thanks for what you did. She nodded once. We're not done yet, Malik. I'll have someone from my office reach out tomorrow. Then she was gone, disappearing into the waiting SUV, leaving Malik with a key in his hand and a knot in his chest. His mother came home an hour later, her hair damp with sweat, her work uniform still on. The second she saw his face, she froze. What happened? He tried to explain, tried to keep his voice steady. But when he got to the part about the officer's hand on his neck, his throat tightened. Her eyes darkened. They put their hands on you? In City Hall. He nodded. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. We're going to the station. No. The word came out sharper than he intended. Please. Just. I can't go back there right now. She exhaled slowly, fighting to keep her composure. Then we'll wait for Ms. Ames. But Malik, you have to understand they're going to spin this. They'll say you were threatening, that you matched a suspect's description. They'll try to make you the villain. Malik already knew. He'd seen it happen to other kids in the news. But knowing it didn't make it any less terrifying. The next morning, the world had already decided to have an opinion about him. Black in City Hall was trending. So was justice for Malik. Some posts called him brave. Others called him a thug. One news clip showed the incident with a caption, "Officer restrains uncooperative teen in government building." Another showed Valerie's confrontation, framing her as overstepping her authority. At school, things weren't better. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Some kids slapped him on the back and said they saw him on TikTok. Others avoided him altogether. Teachers looked at him like he was fragile glass. At lunch, his best friend Jamal slid into the seat across from him. "Yo, you're famous, man." Malik groaned. "Not the kind I wanted to be." "You kidding? You got the Attorney General herself walking you out of City Hall. That's some movie stuff." "Yeah," Malik muttered, stabbing his fork into his tray. "A horror movie." That afternoon, Valerie's office called. Not her directly, an aide named Mr. Harris. "We're setting up a formal statement," Harris said. "We'll need you and your mother at the press conference tomorrow morning. The Attorney General wants you to tell your side of the story." Malik's stomach flipped. "In front of cameras?" "Yes. And, Malik, there's something you should know. Sergeant Blake has already filed his report. He's claiming you were acting suspiciously, refusing to comply, and in what?" Malik asked. Harris hesitated. "And that you reached into your bag in a threatening manner." Malik's chest tightened. "I was reaching for my phone." "I believe you," Harris said quickly. "But the department is already pushing his version to the press. That's why tomorrow matters." That night, Malik couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that chamber, the smell of polished wood, the cold press of the table against his cheek, the sound of his pencils hitting the floor. Around midnight, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Unknown, they're going to come after you. Stay quiet." His fingers hovered over the screen. He thought about showing his mom. He thought about sending it to Valerie. But instead, he turned the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. The press conference was a circus. Cameras lined the steps of the courthouse, reporters shouting questions before Malik had even stepped out of the car. Valerie was already there, standing at the podium in that same navy suit, her presence commanding the chaos into a shaky silence. She started with facts. Yesterday, inside City Hall, a minor named Malik Carter was physically assaulted by Sergeant Daniel Blake without just cause. We have multiple witnesses and video evidence. This is not a misunderstanding. This is an abuse of power. Then she turned to Malik. "Tell them." His mouth went dry. He stepped up to the microphone, the sea of lenses staring back at him. "I was just walking," he began. "I wasn't yelling. I wasn't doing anything wrong. He grabbed me, dragged me into the chamber, and treated me like I was dangerous. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a kid." His voice cracked on the last word. Cameras clicked. Someone in the crowd shouted, "We believe you, Malik." Valerie stepped back to the mic. "The people of this city deserve better than fear in their own government buildings. We are calling for the immediate suspension of Sergeant Blake pending investigation." The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in shouts of protest. Malik could see a cluster of uniformed officers standing off to the side, their faces hard and unreadable. Later that day, as Malik and his mother returned home, they found their front door slightly ajar. Inside, nothing was stolen, but his backpack had been emptied, its contents scattered across the floor. And in the center of the mess, a single colored pencil lay snapped in half. Malik froze in the doorway, his eyes locked on the broken pencil. It wasn't just the fact that someone had been inside their home, it was the message. The pencil wasn't random. It was his. The one that had rolled across the floor of City Hall while Sergeant Blake had him pinned. His mother pushed past him, scanning the small living room with quick, jerky movements. "Malik, go outside. Now." "But go." Her tone had the finality of a slammed door. He stepped back onto the porch, his hands cold even though the afternoon was warm. The street looked the same as always, kids on bikes, an old man watering the patchy grass in front of his house, the hum of traffic in the distance, but it felt different. Unsafe. His mother emerged a few minutes later, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Nothing's missing. But somebody's trying to scare us." "They broke my pencil," Malik said quietly. She looked at him for a long second, then pulled her phone from her pocket. I'm calling Ms. Ames. Valerie showed up herself 20 minutes later, still in her work suit, her expression a storm barely contained. Behind her, the same two plainclothes agents swept through the apartment, photographing the scene, bagging the pencil like evidence from a crime scene. Who has keys to this place? Valerie asked. Just me and Malik, his mother said. The landlord, maybe, but he lives 2 states over. Valerie glanced at Malik. Anyone see you take anything from City Hall yesterday? Papers, files, I didn't take anything, Malik interrupted. I know, she said, her voice softening. But I need to consider what they think they can accuse you of. His mother crossed her arms. So what do we do now? Wait for the next time someone decides to let themselves in. Valerie hesitated, then turned to one of her agents. Set up temporary surveillance. No one goes in or out without being recorded. By nightfall, Malik Street had 2 unfamiliar cars parked at either end. He caught glimpses of the agents inside, dark silhouettes, faint blue glow from their devices. He sat on his bed, staring at the pencil case in his lap. One missing color, one clean snap in the middle. He thought about the message again. It wasn't just intimidation. It was personal. Someone wanted him to feel small, powerless. But mostly, they wanted him silent. The following morning, Valerie called. The department is refusing to suspend Blake, she said without preamble. They're claiming the video is inconclusive. Malik gripped the phone tighter. So they're just going to let him keep doing it? Not if I can help it. But we need more than just the video. We need testimony, sworn under oath, from people in that chamber. I thought there were witnesses. There were, Valerie said. But some are city employees. They're afraid to speak out. Malik stared out the window, at the row of houses with their peeling paint and rusted fences. So I'm on my own. No, she said firmly. You have me. And you have the truth. We just need to make the truth louder than the lies. 2 days later, the first smear article appeared online. Teen at center of City Hall incident has prior school discipline record. It wasn't true Malik had never even had detention, but that didn't stop it from spreading. News anchors debated his character. Comment sections filled with strangers dissecting his life like it was public property. At dinner, his mother slid her phone face down on the table. Don't read the comments, she said. I'm not, Malik lied. The threats came next. A piece of paper slid under their door one night, in block letters. Drop it or else. 2 days later, someone spray-painted liar across the side of their building. The surveillance caught nothing. Whoever was doing it knew the blind spots. Valerie's patience frayed. They're trying to push you until you break, she told Malik. But every time you keep going, they lose a little more control. The preliminary hearing for Blake was scheduled for the following week. The courthouse lobby was thick with tension. That morning, half the crowd there to support Malik, the other half there to support the officer. Signs waved in the air. Hold cops accountable on one side. Stand with our police on the other. The chants collided, echoing off the marble walls. Malik walked between Valerie and her security detail, his pulse thudding in his ears. Cameras flashed. People shouted his name, some with encouragement, others with venom. Inside, the atmosphere was colder but no less hostile. Blake sat at the defense table in a crisp uniform, his jaw set, his eyes flicking toward Malik with something between disdain and challenge. Valerie leaned toward Malik. When you take the stand, look at the jury, not him. He wants you rattled. Malik nodded, though his palms were already slick with sweat. When his name was called, Malik stepped forward, the sound of his sneakers on the floor louder than it should have been. He swore the oath, took his seat, and gripped the armrests. The prosecutor, not Valerie, but someone from her office, started gently. Malik, can you tell us in your own words what happened on the day in question? He told the story again. The hallway, the hand on his shoulder, the chamber, the table, the pencils, Valerie's entrance. And then came the defense attorney. Mr. Carter, the man said smoothly. Is it true you were lingering near the clerk's office without any clear purpose? I was walking to the bus stop, Malik said. And is it also true that you reached into your bag in a sudden motion? I was getting my phone. You expected the officer to know that? I didn't think I had to explain getting my phone. Malik shot back before he could stop himself. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge rapped his gavel. The defense attorney's eyes narrowed. And yet, somehow, you expect this jury to believe you were entirely innocent in this interaction. Malik met his gaze. I don't expect them to believe anything. I'm telling them what happened. When he stepped down from the stand, Valerie's hand brushed his shoulder briefly. A small gesture, but enough to steady his breathing. The hearing ended without a ruling. The judge scheduled a continuation, citing the need for more testimony. Blake walked out of the courtroom, smiling faintly. Malik hated how much that smile got under his skin. That night, Malik was woken by a crash. He bolted upright, heart hammering. His mother burst into his room. "Stay here." He heard footsteps heavy, deliberate, and then the sound of a door slamming. By the time the agent stationed outside rushed in, the intruder was gone. In the kitchen, the window was shattered. On the counter lay another broken colored pencil. Malik couldn't sleep after that. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the pencil pieces in front of him like evidence from a nightmare. Valerie came by as soon as she heard. This time, there was no softening in her tone. They're escalating, which means they're scared. And when people like that get scared, they make mistakes. Malik thought about it. Maybe she was right. Maybe the broken pencils weren't just warnings, maybe they were proof that the other side was losing control. For the first time since City Hall, he felt something other than fear. He felt anger. And anger, he realized, could be a kind of strength. Malik had never felt time move so slowly. Every day, until the continuation of the hearing, felt like a year. The city buzzed with the case, talk shows debated it, marches filled downtown streets, and every time Malik stepped outside, he felt eyes on him. But instead of shrinking, he stood taller. He wore the suit Valerie had helped his mother buy for him, walked with his chin up, and when strangers told him, "Don't let them shut you up," he nodded and meant it. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse steps were packed. The crowd was larger than before, spilling into the street. On one side, supporters chanted his name. On the other, counter-protesters waved flags and signs demanding law and order. Police lined the barricades, their faces unreadable. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The jury had been called back. New witnesses were ready to speak. Valerie sat near the front, her hands clasped, her gaze locked on the judge. Malik took his seat beside the prosecutor. The first witness was a city clerk named Mrs. Alvarez. She was nervous. Malik could see it in the way she twisted her wedding ring. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I saw Sergeant Blake grab the boy without cause," she said. Malik wasn't doing anything wrong. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any threats. He just existed, and that was enough for Blake to act. The defense tried to rattle her. "Are you suggesting the officer fabricated his account?" "I'm saying what I saw," she replied, her chin lifting. "And what I saw was wrong." Next came a local journalist who had been in the chamber. She'd captured one of the clearest videos of the incident. It played on the courtroom screen. Malik bent over the table, Blake's hand on his neck, Valerie stepping into the frame. The sound of her palm hitting the bench made the jury flinch. The defense objected to emotional manipulation, but the judge overruled. When the lights came back up, you could feel the shift in the room. The video didn't just tell Malik's story, it made people feel it. Blake himself was called to testify. He sat with the same rigid posture he'd worn since day one, his answers clipped. "I perceived a threat," he said, repeating the phrase like a shield. "What threat?" the prosecutor pressed. "A sudden movement toward a bag. Even though the bag contained school supplies and a phone." Blake's jaw tightened. "I couldn't know that in the moment." Valerie's eyes narrowed from her seat. Malik could almost hear the thought behind them. "You didn't want to know." When it was Malik's turn to be cross-examined again, the defense tried one last angle. "Mr. Carter, do you believe all police officers are racist?" Malik blinked. "No. I believe some abuse their power. And I believe when that happens, they need to be held accountable just like anyone else." "And you think you can decide who that is?" "No," Malik said, looking straight at the jury. "That's your job. I'm just telling you what happened to me." Closing arguments began. The prosecutor's voice was calm but sharp. "This case isn't about politics. It's about whether a child has the right to walk through his city without fear of being treated as a criminal for the color of his skin. If we excuse this, we send a message to every officer in this city that they can do the same and worse without consequence." The defense framed Blake as a man making a split-second decision in a dangerous world. Officers are trained to act on instinct. Sometimes that instinct saves lives. But Malik noticed something. The jury wasn't looking at Blake anymore. They were looking at him. The jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. On the charge of assault under color of authority, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted shouts of relief from Malik's side, outrage from Blake's supporters. The judge banged his gavel for order. Blake sat stone-faced, but his hands clenched so tightly the veins stood out. Malik exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Valerie reached over, squeezing his hand once. Outside the courthouse, the crowd surged forward, reporters firing questions. Valerie stepped to the microphones first. Today, justice spoke. But this isn't the end. This is proof that the system can work when people refuse to be silent. Malik Carter stood up for himself, and in doing so, stood up for countless others who have been silenced. Then she gestured to him. Malik. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. Cameras flashed, mics extended toward his face. I didn't want any of this, he said. I didn't want to be on TV. I didn't want to go to court. I just wanted to go home that day. But when someone tries to take your voice, you have two choices: stay quiet, or speak so loud they can't ignore you. I chose to speak. Cheers rose from the crowd. Malik caught sight of his mother in the front row, tears streaking her cheeks, but her smile wide and fierce. That night, the streets of his neighborhood felt different. Safer, somehow. Kids waved when they saw him. An old man at the corner store clapped him on the shoulder and said, "You did good, son." Back home, Malik sat at his desk, pulling out his colored pencils. He took the broken one, the one from City Hall, the one from the break-in, and carefully sharpened both halves. It wasn't perfect. The break was still there, visible if you looked closely. But it still worked. Just like him. Weeks later, Malik would still get recognized. The threats stopped. Blake was stripped of his badge. Valerie pushed forward new policy changes for accountability in law enforcement. But for Malik, the victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments, walking to school without looking over his shoulder, laughing with Jamal at lunch, seeing his mother relax for the first time in months. He knew racism wasn't gone. He knew there were still people who'd look at him and only see a threat. But he also knew something they couldn't take back. He'd faced them. He'd told the truth. And he'd been heard. On a rainy afternoon, Valerie stopped by their apartment. She handed Malik a small, wrapped box. Inside was a brand new set of colored pencils. "Thought you might need a fresh start," she said. Malik smiled. "Thanks. But I'm keeping the old ones, too." She raised an eyebrow. "They remind me," he explained, "that even when something's broken, it can still make something beautiful." Valerie's smile was small but proud. That's a good lesson to hold on to. And as the rain tapped against the window, Malik realized the story wasn't about how it started with fear, with violence, with a hand on his neck. It was about how it ended. With him standing. With him whole. With him unbroken. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.